Do you like mysteries? To wander through the enigmatic mist of the inexplicable? Great. I'm Merc, and here you'll find what you're looking for. Welcome to my domains. The truth dissolves into the mist.
You have probably heard of ghosts before. Spectral figures that haunt old houses, vengeful spirits that seek retribution, phantoms that cannot find peace. But the ghosts, the ones from Western folklore, they are children's tales compared to what lurks in the shadows of Korean mythology. In Korea, the dead do not simply fade away. They wait, they watch. And if you forget them, if you neglect the rituals that bind them to the world of the living, they transform into something far more terrifying than a mere apparition. They become Gwishin. The word itself carries weight. Gwishin, written as in Hangul, and Gwishin in Hanja, translates literally to ghost deity. But that translation fails to capture the true essence of what this entity represents. Unlike the ghosts of Western tradition, which are often seen as harmless echoes of the deceased or malevolent demons from a spiritual realm, the Gwishin occupies a unique and deeply unsettling space in Korean folklore. It is not simply a spirit. It is a soul condemned to wander the earth, trapped between worlds, because the living have failed in their most sacred duty. Imagine dying, not with the peaceful acceptance of a life well lived, but with a scream caught in your throat, with injustice burning in your chest, with the cruel knowledge that your story remains unfinished. Now imagine that your family, the people who should honor your memory, simply forgets you. No rituals are performed, no food is offered, no prayers are whispered. Your body is laid to rest, but your soul is left to rot in the limbo between life and death. This is the fate that creates a Gwishin. In Korean culture, death is not the end. It is a transition, a passage that requires the active participation of the living. Ancestral rites, known as Jesa, are the bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. These ceremonies are performed with utmost sincerity, as if the departed ancestor were still alive. Food is prepared and laid out on a table. Incense is burned. Bowls of rice and cups of soju are offered. The family gathers, not to mourn, but to commune. They speak to their ancestors, they seek their blessings, and they reaffirm the bond that death itself cannot sever. But what happens when that bond is broken? What happens when the Jesa is neglected, when the graves are left untended, when the memory of the deceased fades into oblivion? According to Korean folklore, the soul of the forgotten dead does not simply disappear. It lingers, it grows restless, and eventually it becomes something that the living must fear. The Gwishin is born from neglect. Its rage is directly proportional to the indifference shown to its mortal remains. The more you forget, the more it remembers. The more you ignore, the more it hunts. You might be wondering, is every forgotten soul doomed to become a Gwishin? The answer is more complex than a simple yes or no. There are specific conditions that must be met, circumstances that transform a restless spirit into a vengeful phantom. The most important factor is the nature of the death itself. A peaceful death, surrounded by loved ones, with all rituals properly observed, allows the soul to pass on to the afterlife, known in Korean tradition as Gyeosung. But a violent death, an unjust death, a premature death, these are the seeds from which Gwishin grow. History tells us that women, physically weaker and socially vulnerable, were far more likely to suffer such fates. This is why the most common and most terrifying Gwishin is the Cheonyeo Gwishin, the virgin ghost. She is the spirit of a young woman who died unmarried, unable to fulfill the role that society demanded of her. In the rigid hierarchy of the Joseon period, A woman's purpose was to serve her father, her husband, and her children. If she failed to marry, if she died before she could bear a son, her life was considered incomplete, and in death her soul was denied entry to the ancestral rites. She had no place in the family's ceremonies, no offerings to sustain her, no descendants to remember her name. And so she wanders, dressed in white mourning clothes, her long black hair loose and unbound, a stark contrast to the tied-back hair of a married woman. She is often described as pale, almost translucent, with a complexion ashen and lifeless. Sometimes she has a face contorted with rage and sorrow. Sometimes she is faceless, a blank mask of horror that reflects the emptiness of her existence. She appears in abandoned buildings, in deserted schools, in the dark corners of the world where the living fear to tread, and she is not alone. There are other types of Gwishin, each born from a different flavor of tragedy. The Cheonyeo Gwishin, also known as the Mul Gwishin, is the male equivalent of the virgin ghost. He is the spirit of a bachelor who died unmarried, denied the same ancestral rights as his female counterpart. In some shamanistic rituals, the Cheonyeo and the Cheonyeo are united in a spiritual marriage, a desperate attempt to grant them the completion they were denied in life. If the ritual is successful, they find peace and can finally leave the world of the living. If it fails, their resentment only deepens. Then there is the Mul Gwishin, the water ghost. This is the spirit of someone who drowned, trapped forever in the cold, dark depths where they met their end. These ghosts are desperately lonely, and in their loneliness they seek companions. If you are careless near a river, if you swim in a lake at night, you might feel a cold hand wrap around your ankle, pulling you down into the watery abyss. The Koreans have a term for this, Mul Gwishin, or water ghost tactics. It describes the act of dragging someone down with you, a form of sabotage that echoes the desperate cruelty of a drowned soul. Perhaps the strangest of them all is the Cheonyeo Gwishin, the egg ghost. This spirit takes the form of an egg, with no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no arms, no legs. The name might sound almost comical, but make no mistake, the Cheonyeo Gwishin is one of the most dangerous entities in Korean folklore. It is said to be the spirit of a woman who had an affair with a nobleman. When the nobleman's wife discovered the betrayal, she had the woman's face set on fire. The resulting spirit, faceless and formless, roams the earth in a state of eternal agony. It is a reminder that the cruelty of the living can create monsters that transcend death itself. The Gwishin is not merely a ghost story to frighten children. It is a fundamental part of the Korean worldview, a belief system that has shaped the culture for centuries. The Gwishin embodies the concept of Han, a uniquely Korean feeling of unresolved resentment and sorrow against injustice. Han is not simply anger. It is a deep, collective wound, a grief that has been passed down through generations. It is the feeling of a nation that has been invaded, occupied, and divided. It is the feeling of a people who have endured immense suffering and yet have somehow survived. The Gwishin is the physical manifestation of that Han. But here is the crucial difference between the Gwishin and the vengeful spirits of other cultures. The Gwishin does not exist to torment the innocent. It exists to seek justice. It appears before those who wronged it, not necessarily to kill, but to frighten them into acknowledging their crimes. The Gwishin wants closure. It wants the living to right the wrongs that were committed against it. It wants its story to be heard. And if the living refuse to listen, if they ignore the pleas of the dead, then the Gwishin becomes something far more dangerous. It becomes a predator. Think about that for a moment. Imagine a spirit that does not want to hurt you, but simply wants you to acknowledge its existence. Imagine a ghost that is not inherently evil, but has been driven to madness by neglect. The Gwishin is a mirror, reflecting the failures of the living back at them. If you encounter a Gwishin, it is not a random occurrence. It is a direct consequence of something you or your ancestors have done. or, more accurately, something you have failed to do. The rituals that appease the Gwishin are not mere superstition. They are acts of profound spiritual responsibility. In Korean shamanism, known as Mu, there are rituals called Gut that are performed to resolve grievances and restore balance. These ceremonies are often elaborate, involving music, dance, and offerings. The shaman, or mudang, acts as a mediator between the living and the dead. They communicate with the spirits, they listen to their complaints, and they work to find a resolution that will allow the Gwishin to finally move on. It is a desperate and dangerous task. A shaman who fails to appease a Gwishin risks becoming its next victim. Ksa. The story of the Kangkang Gwishin is a perfect example of this dynamic. In a high school somewhere in Korea, there was a very hard-working student. They studied tirelessly, but they could never achieve the top rank. They were always second. The student was consumed by jealousy and resentment. One day, they snapped. They murdered the student who always came first. But in their panic, they made a mistake. The murder was discovered. The student was executed, and then the Gwishin began to appear. The spirit of the murdered student, filled with rage and a thirst for vengeance, began to hunt the killer. Even in death, the killer could not escape the consequences of their actions. What makes this story so chilling is the implication that the Gwishin can find you no matter where you hide. It does not matter if you move to a new city, if you change your name, if you build walls around yourself. The Gwishin is bound to you by the invisible threads of karma and obligation. It will wait, it will watch, and when you least expect it, it will appear. The Gwishin does not forget. It cannot forget. Forgetting is a luxury that only the living can afford. Q might be thinking, this is all just folklore, ancient stories told around a fire to scare children. But the belief in Gwishin is not confined to the past. It is a living, breathing part of Korean culture. There are still people today who perform jesa for their ancestors, who tend to graves, who offer food and drink to the spirits of the dead. It is not done out of fear, but out of love and respect. It is an acknowledgement that the bond between the living and the dead is sacred. It is a promise that the dead will not be forgotten. But what happens when that promise is broken? What happens in a modern world where families are scattered, traditions are abandoned, and the old ways are dismissed as primitive superstition? The answer, according to Korean folklore, is that the Gwishin will return. They will return to the places they once called home. They will return to the people who were supposed to remember them, and they will demand what they are owed. The Gwishin is a warning. It is a reminder that the dead are not gone. They are simply waiting. Consider the Cheonyeo Gwishin once more. She is a symbol of the countless women who suffered and died in silence, their voices unheard, their stories untold. She is a product of a society that valued women only for their ability to serve men. And yet, in death, she has found a terrifying power. She is no longer a victim. She is a force to be reckoned with. She appears in the dead of night, her white robes billowing in the wind, her long hair obscuring her face. She does not speak. She does not need to. Her presence alone is enough to freeze the blood in your veins. Gui. There are countless stories of Cheonyeo Gwishin appearing to men who have wronged women. The cheating husband, the abusive boyfriend, the cruel father. They see her standing at the foot of their bed, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. They feel her cold breath on their neck. They hear her whispers in the dead of night, whispers that speak of pain, of betrayal, of a thirst for justice that will never be quenched. Some men are driven mad by these encounters. Others simply disappear. No one knows what happens to them. Perhaps they are taken to the underworld. Perhaps they are simply erased from existence. But the Gwishin is not always a figure of terror. There are stories of Gwishin who have found peace. These are the spirits who encounter a person brave enough to listen, righteous enough to act, a traveler who stumbles upon a forgotten grave and offers a prayer, a student who investigates a ghost story and uncovers a long-buried injustice, a shaman who performs a ritual with sincerity and skill. When a Gwishin meets such a person, something remarkable happens. The rage fades from its eyes. The sorrow leaves its face. It pulls its hair back neatly, revealing a visage that is surprisingly serene. It offers words of gratitude, and then, finally, it disappears. It moves on to Geosung, the place for the dead, where it can finally rest. This is the ultimate message of the Gwishin legend. The dead are not our enemies. They are our ancestors, our loved ones, our forgotten neighbors. They are a part of us, and we are a part of them. The rituals we perform, the memories we keep, the stories we tell, these are the threads that connect us to the past. When we neglect those threads, we do more than just forget the dead. We create monsters. The Gwishin is a ghost, yes, but it is also a mirror. It reflects our own failures, our own neglect, our own cruelty. When you see a Gwishin, you are not just seeing a spirit. You are seeing the consequences of your own actions. You are seeing the darkness that lurks in the human heart, the darkness that we try so hard to ignore. The Gwishin does not create that darkness. It simply reveals it. So, the next time you hear a strange noise in the night, the next time you feel a chill run down your spine, the next time you see a flicker of movement out of the corner of your eye, ask yourself this question: have you forgotten someone? Have you neglected a ritual? Have you broken a promise to the dead? If the answer is yes, then be careful, because the Gwishin is out there. It is watching, and it is waiting. It waits for the moment when your guard is down, when your faith is weak, when your memory fails. It waits for the moment when you become the next chapter in its eternal story of vengeance and sorrow. But there is another question you must ask yourself, a question that is far more unsettling than the first. What if the Gwishin is not a ghost at all? What if the Gwishin is something else, something that wears the mask of the dead to hide its true nature? In Korean folklore, there are creatures that are not quite human, not quite spirit. They are called Yogo, and they are similar to Gwishin, but they are not the souls of the deceased. They are something else entirely, something ancient, something hungry. Perhaps the Gwishin is not a forgotten soul. Perhaps it is a predator that has learned to mimic the voices of the dead. It is a terrifying thought, is it not? The idea that the ghost you see might not be your ancestor at all, that the spirit you try to appease might be something far more sinister, that the rituals you perform might be feeding a monster instead of soothing a soul. The line between the living and the dead is thin, and sometimes the things that cross that line are not what they appear to be. The Gwishin is a mystery, it is a legend, it is a warning. It is a reflection of our deepest fears and our greatest failures. It is the forgotten dead, crying out from the darkness, demanding to be remembered. And we have a choice. We can ignore their cries. We can pretend they do not exist. We can go about our lives, blissfully unaware of the spirits that surround us. Or we can listen. We can remember. We can perform the rituals, tell the stories, and keep the memory of the dead alive. The choice is ours, but we must choose carefully, because the Gwishin does not forgive, and it does not forget.
Did you like this mystery? And what is your theory? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, then like and share. I'm Merc, and I'll be waiting for you in the next mystery.